Hi, good morning. Today is March 24th, 2026, and it is 9:47 a.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguilar Marcano, and this is demo or declaration um, D130, so 130. Um, so for today, I have a few small items, a few updates, really, things that have happened in the last few days. So let me catch you up. Let me kind of summarize the last conversation, right? So in the last conversation, I told you about this realization that Tyler Technologies. Like this was the last two demos, right? Tyler Technologies is basically the infrastructure on which this judiciary corruption runs, and they are a public traded company. Uh, and they have contracts to run the state courts of 20 something states. I mean, the electronic record systems of the courts, the dockets. And in some cases, they even have the electronic filing systems of those states. Some of them, right? Like, for example, in Texas. In Texas, they control the two systems, the filing system and the record keeping system. Um, And then I also realized that if you look at the investment mix of the different companies that invest in them, they're mostly institutional investors, and they have big chunks of investment. But Vanguard being one of the leading ones, right? They have something like a 17% stake on the $13 billion valuation or market cap, not valuation, the market cap of Tyler Technologies. So about 17% of the market capitalization of Tyler Technologies came from Vanguard, from this specific set of products of Vanguard. And these products are aggregators of investment of, everyday Americans, right? That they contribute to things like retirement funds, pension funds, and things like that. And also index products, like the Vanguard index, things like that. Things that basically track the S&P 500, things like that. Anyhow, yeah. So I realized, that the mix was like that, right? And I was thinking about this and afterwards, right? And you could make the argument that, well, maybe the mix looks like that because this is not a consumer-facing company, right? Like, because in the previous demo, I made the point of saying, well, if you look at Apple, the mix will contain a lot of investment from everyday people, right? That go to a retailer bank and buy stock directly instead of investing through Vanguard, for example. Uh, but then, I started thinking about that and I thought, well, but maybe, it could be explained as, um, well, Apple and Google and those companies, maybe the mix is different because they are consumer facing. They create iPhones, so more people know about the existence of the company, and therefore they get more investment that way. I mean, from people directly, right? Direct investment. But I don't know. I think that still doesn't explain it. I mean, this is just my opinion, right? I don't have a way to prove that this is the case. I mean, this would require, rigorous investigation. But even if I don't think that would explain it because even if it's a non-consumer facing company, if it's so successful, I mean, if this company has contracts, and these are exclusive contracts because the courts can have only one record-keeping system, right? There cannot be competition on this. And they have 24 states. So, I mean, that is a considerable amount of all the states in the U.S., right? Uh, so they're definitely successful, right? They're definitely, the dominance in that market is almost absolute. Um, and I mean, in a few years, it would be absolute domination. I mean, for this company on this market. So if they're so successful, many Americans would invest in this company. To put it simple, right? Like the people in the courts have to know that this company is so successful, and they would want to invest in that company, right? Um, and their families will want to invest in this company, right? It's not possible that the mix is so heavy on institutional investors, and but it's not a company that is well known by individual private investors, like people, right? So I don't know. I think that doesn't still explain it. But that's where we left it up left in the previous demo. But then I was doing some more research and to understand the size of this problem, right? Because then when I notified. And actually, I did this last week before even recording the demo. I notified Vanguard about this risk, right? That they are heavily invested in this company. They have a $2 billion stake, billion with B. And this company is involved in this RICO enterprise, right? And I sent them proof. I mean, this is not like empty words, right? I sent them the dockets that show that they are suppressing the documents, right? In my cases, to harass me because I'm blowing the whistle. So this, of course, shows, and it's not one case; it's 3 different cases in Fort Bend County, and it's important because I wrote a book about that features prominently the county judge is called of Fort Bend County, KP George, and also I sued Governor Abbott, the governor of Texas, in federal court. So of course they're going to harass me with the Texas courts, right? But the instrument of harassment, the courts are the instruments of harassment, but what enables them is Tyler Technologies, because that's the way they hide the documents, and they create multiple versions of the orders and all those things, right? That I already discussed. So anyhow, I sent Vanguard a notice that they have this risk, but I sent it to the chief economist of Vanguard via email, but he didn't even acknowledge the email. I didn't get any response back after a few days. So because of that, I filed a report with the SEC, a whistleblower report, a referral, saying, I see this risk in the market. I have this proof that this Tyler Technologies company is involved in this RICO enterprise. I've notified Vanguard because they have a $2 billion stake in the company, and they haven't replied. And I believe they have a duty to notify their investors, right, and the people that are participants in their plans. So that's the new development. Now here I have to tell you, I think this thing that I did was, I don't know how to phrase this, but it was like a different scale, like in terms of what it's doing to them. Like, and I can tell you, like, I can see this in their behavior. The way they're behaving in the last 2 days after I did this is different. Like, I can see it. I can see complete changes in behavior, in both in the way they're driving the cars and in the neighbors at Lake Point Estates. So that made me curious, right? Because I was a customer of Vanguard, right? But to me, Vanguard is just a bank, right? It's just an institution. Like, I don't know really as a citizen. I have no idea, no visibility really into what is Vanguard really. What are the dimensions of Vanguard? I have no idea, right? But I had a data point. And the data point is that I know that their stake on Tyler Technologies is about $2 billion. And I also know that is about 0.02% of their entire portfolio across 3,500 companies within this set of products that I analyzed. So if you do the math, right? But if with these 2 numbers, you can infer, doing simple math, that the assets under management of Vanguard are about $6.5 trillion. This is what it means, right? Because if they have $2 billion invested in Tyler Technologies, and that is only 0.02% of their total investment, if you do the math, they must have 6.5 trillion, right? But even knowing that, to me, that's something that is hard to put in perspective in terms of money, because I don't know, like, as a human being, right? As a citizen, you are used to dealing with thousands of dollars, right? Maybe, if you're a very wealthy individual, you could be dealing in millions of dollars. So, after you pass billions, the thing becomes meaningless. Like, it's very hard for a person like me to understand what's the difference between, what's the real difference? Like, I don't know how to describe this, but in practical terms, what does this number mean is what I'm trying to get at, right? Like, what is $6.5 trillion? how can I grasp that magnitude as a person that doesn't deal with trillions, right? I imagine for a head of a state, if you talk to them about trillions of dollars, they will have an idea what they could get with that, right? But I have no idea. So I started doing some research, right, to try to understand what is 6.5 trillion dollars that Vanguard has as assets under management. So I did what I always do, right? I go to one of these AI systems and I ask the question as a human. Like, tell me, what can I buy with 6.5 trillion dollars? Well, the answer was amazing, right? Like, I mean, amazing in the way that it's mind bending, right? So to give you an idea, the cost of the Second World War, if you adjust it for inflation to 2026, the cost would be $6 trillion. So this means that with the assets under management that Vanguard has, they could finance the entire 5 years of the World War II, adjusted for inflation, and they would still have 10% of the budget left to do something else, right? To celebrate, right? So I mean, it's an staggering amount of wealth, right? I mean, of money, of monetary power. And I don't know, another analogies I could give you. You could, with $6.5 trillion, you could buy all the properties, all the real estate properties in Canada, and you would still have money left. So the real estate market in Canada, in the entire country, if you buy every single piece of land and property, is $6 trillion. And Vanguard has $6.5 trillion under management. Another analogy I found from this in this way was that if you wanted to buy all the apartments and villas in Spain, France, and Italy, you could also do that with $6 trillion. And again, so Vanguard could buy all of that, right? So I mean, it's a staggering amount of money, right? So staggering that there's not enough things to buy in the world. Like if they started, they cannot do it, right? Because this is not their money. This is the money of the investors, right? But assume for a second that they decided, right? There's no law and they could take this money and buy anything they wanted. This would create an economic catastrophe, because if they start buying everything they can with this $6 trillion, they would buy so many things that it would create inflation and prices will go up to infinite. Like the acceleration on inflation would be so huge that prices would tend to infinite. This is what it means in mathematical terms, right? I mean, it's an staggering amount of wealth. But I'm telling you this because, I mean, and I think this is why they changed their behavior, right? Like, for example, when I went to court yesterday, it was a show. Like, it was a completely different situation than on February 2nd. It seemed all to be normal. Like, this was just a regular traffic citation for $100, right? But anyhow, it's because of this. It's because of the liability, right? Because now Vanguard, these companies that holds this amount of holds on their management, right? This staggering amount of wealth accumulated by American families using their hard work, right? By these are the monies of teachers, of electricians, of plumbers. These are not the money of Travis Kalanick and Elon Musk. But it's a huge country and it has a lot of hardworking people, right? So, and they work for years, for decades to accumulate that money. So Vanguard has it under management. And 1 second, because there is a dangerous situation here with a truck. So it's a tremendous amount of money, But now they have a huge stake on Tyler Technologies, and I have proof, physical evidence, that Tyler Technology it's part of this RICO enterprise of the judges, right? And they have a duty to disclose it to the SEC. So this creates a problem, because if they disclose it, then Tyler Technology gets in trouble, and I win. I basically get to talk to the FBI. And if that happens, they will get in trouble anyways, right? And if they don't disclose it, then they become part of the conspiracy. And the $6.5 trillion, that they hold under management could not be held under management anymore by them, right? And that will take away their power. Let me tell you why I say that about power, right? I also understood that with those $6.5 trillion in assets under management, because what they do with that money is that they invest them in different companies. They buy shares. And when you buy shares in public companies, you get basically in exchange, some of those shares have voting powers, meaning that you can vote on the decisions made by the company, by the board. Right? You have votes. So imagine what they're doing is they're taking all this money from Americans and they're using it to buy shares in American companies, and that gives them the power to vote. So really, I mean, the vector of attack really, I think, is that they're using the wealth of the hardworking Americans to get for themselves voting power in thousands of American companies. And with that voting power, which is immense because we're talking about $6 trillion worth of voting power, right? To give you an idea, the GDP of the US is $28 trillion. So Vanguard alone has a voting power equivalent to a third of the US GDP. And put specifically to work on voting on decisions made by American companies. So this gives Vanguard's investors, the people that make the investment decisions at Vanguard, an immense power because they can basically direct the policies of all the companies with this amount of money, right? That is not theirs. It's really money of the Americans, right? Of the American workers. But they have it under management, and that gives them the voting power. So they can basically put and remove CEOs anytime they want, because they can just buy the shares, right, and get the voting power to vote the CEO out and put him out of the way. So basically, the CEOs have to be servant to Vanguard, right? So it's a mean of control, really. But it's an interesting one because it's based on weaponizing the money of the targets. We are basically financing this. As I said in the previous demo, right? At some point, myself being now a target of this network. Well, I have been a target of this network for a long time, but now they're trying to actively, harm me. At some point, I had over $1 million invested in Vanguard funds that were used in this way, right? In fact, some of that money went, 0.02% of that money went to Tyler Technologies, who is now helping the judges keep my son kidnapped. But it's an interesting vector of attack that they have, right? Because they are basically, I don't know. I think I have to think more about this, right? Because what they're doing really is using our own energy in a way against us, right? But this also led me to understand something. And this is a bit more philosophical. And there's a demo where I talked about this maybe 6 months ago about the abdication of the government in certain functions, right? So the government advocated things like geospatial mapping in favor of Google Maps, right? Like if you need to find something, you go to Google, you don't go to the government, right? And this is dangerous because this gives these private entities a lot of power, and they could change things in the map and nobody would know, right? And they are only responsible to their shareholders. They're only accountable to their shareholders. And who's the shareholders? Well, Vanguard, right? So yeah, it's the Communist Party of China who's the shareholder, right? In this way, they don't even have to buy the shares. They just have to convince enough Americans, directly or indirectly, to give them the money. And that allows them to buy the shares, and then that allows them to control the companies, right? The tech companies. But anyhow, what I understood is that in a way, this is also a different type of abdication. It's not the government abdicating, it's us abdicating it. And abdicating. And this is a theory. I have to think more about this. I might be wrong here, but it feels to me, based on my own experience at least, that what we are abdicating here is our own responsibility of managing our own money. Why? Well, because if you think about it, right? When I was working for Google and I had these retirement plans and all that, I had them with Vanguard. And this is an abdication, right? Because what I'm really doing, if you think about it, what I'm doing while I'm doing that is really delegating the responsibility of managing my own money, my own investment, and my own decisions to have a comfortable retirement on an external entity. I didn't want to do the work myself. I didn't want to do the research myself, or I felt like I didn't have the time, I didn't have the knowledge, or I didn't have whatever, right? Well, for whatever reason, it seems like I decided that it was better if I let Vanguard manage my money. And that's abdication. That is the definition of abdication, right? It's something that I should be doing myself, right? I mean, who should be managing your money? Yourself, right? But I didn't. I was lazy, right? I thought I had more important things to do, and I let Google, my employer, make that decision for me and give my money to Vanguard. And then I let Vanguard put my money anywhere they wanted, including Tyler Technologies, which allowed that in a way, right? I mean, I contributed only a little bit, right, to this, but out of that $1 million, $20,000 went to Tyler Technologies. And those $20,000, in one way or another, helped Tyler Technologies control the core systems of many states, including Texas, and at the end, that allowed them to help the judges take away my parental rights, the custody of my child, because I'm blowing the whistle, right? But it's another form of abdication, I think. It's only that this abdication is being done by us directly, by private citizens, delegating our responsibility over our money to our employers and then to Vanguard or similar retirement funds or plans. And in aggregate, this is dangerous. I mean, you may not see it as dangerous to you, but in aggregate, if everybody does this is dangerous, because this gives these companies, Vanguard, and who controls them directly or indirectly, like if they have people's, like, if the Communist Party of China manages to compromise decision makers at Vanguard, then they can make decisions to benefit the Communist Party of China using our money. You see? But this is all possible only because we collectively, millions of us, advocated on the responsibility of managing our own money. Yes, but I'm telling you all this story to tell you that I think that I finally found the right scale of how to counter-attack what they're doing, right? The reason I say this is because, if I file a report with the IRS complaining about or, reporting Liana Technologies or Akamai or, companies that are worth billions of dollars, they still keep harassing. Like this doesn't deter them. I'm talking about the Communist Party of China. Like if they see risk on a company worth billions of dollars, still they do not get deterred. But they got deterred when they saw risk on Vanguard. So this tells me that the level of threat that they have to perceive to retreat is in the trillions of dollars. It's not that's why I was not able to make any progress until now, because I was operating still on the wrong scale. I was targeting things that are worth billions, and that's not enough. I have to target things that are worth trillions, and that's when they're gonna back off. Okay. And then, this realization made me start thinking about this. Okay, so why is that? I mean, I understand $6 trillion is a lot of money, right? Even for a country. But why is that it has to be in the trillions for the Chinese to back down? And I started looking at, okay, so what is the GDP of China, right? And I think that exactly there lies the reason. The GDP of China is around $20 trillion. And the amount of that, and their expenses as a country, the entire country of China, I think from what I saw in Gemini, is around $16 trillion per year, right? So, if you put that in perspective, this means that China as a country, the entire economy, everything, all things considered, can save around $4 trillion per year. And they could, if they get in trouble, they could lose control over this $6.5 trillion. It would take them a year and a half of saving to just accumulate the same amount of money, and it would be in China. It wouldn't be in the US. Because remember, it's not, the money has a relative value. It depends where it is, right? If you have the money in China, for them, it's not very useful because their objective is to control American companies, not Chinese companies, right? Let me turn this off because it's making a lot of noise. Their objective with gathering all this wealth is to control American companies so they can oppress us and they can, colonize the country, right? So having this money in China is of no use to them. I imagine, right, if you want to bring $6.5 trillion US dollars, right, to the US and have them legitimized in this financial system, that would probably cost you, I don't know, 5 times more, right? Because you have to launder that money. You cannot just, how can you justify bringing $6.5 trillion to the country in a second? Like, you can't, right? You have to launder this money with very complex laundering operations. And I imagine that makes that is inefficient, right? That creates losses. So I imagine, right, to bring $6 trillion to the US in a day or, in a few months, you would have to spend probably, I would put it at $30 trillion. So this would take them 10 years to save, So, this weapon that they have with having the direct or indirect, I don't know how is that they're exerting control over the investment decisions of Vanguard, but they obviously are, right? I'm talking about the Communist Party of China. I don't know if it's structural, if it's that they have certain people inserted in Vanguard as employees and they make those decisions. Or I don't know if it's something deeper than that, right? I don't know. But anyhow, right, it would take the Chinese like 5 years to save enough money to be able to have in the US an equivalent amount of money that they could use in a similar way. So this is why they're backing off, right? Because, they're changing their behavior. I'm saying that they're backing off, right? Because they still haven't returned the child. But I see a rapid change in behavior. It's because of that, right? As a country, it would take them half a decade to get to develop a similar weapon in U.S. soil, as they have right now with those $6.5 trillion that they could move around, right? So long story short, I think I found the right scale, right? I have to target things that are worth to them trillions of dollars. Otherwise, they're not going to back down. Yes. So now I'm going to transition to another set of topics, right? These are more like low level, right? Compared to what I just said, these are like tiny things. Yes. So, in the last demo, I also told you about letter stream, right? And how controlled it is and how it's marking the index, even with the special encoder of the longitude being being negated, right? So the negative longitude being turned into a positive longitude. So I told you about that, and after that, I started looking for another mailing company, right, that I can replace a letter stream by. And there's like 4 providers, at least in the US, that do this work. But what's concerning is that, in this business of mailing things from the internet, there's different products, right? You can send things through, for example, just USPS First Mail, which is regular mail, or you can send it through registered mail, right? Which is the kind of mail that, or certified. I can't recall, because like in Canada, it's the name is and I used to live in Canada before. So in Canada, the naming is the opposite. What is registered in one country is called certified in the other. So I always get them. But, the one that you can use for legal services. There's a type of mailing that after the person signs for the package, you, the sender, you get a document with that, issued by USPS that says, the package was delivered. And you can use this in court. This is important for legal proceedings. So what's concerning is that out of the 5 or 6 companies that I found that do mailing over the internet, only 4 have this kind of service that is appropriate for legal proceedings. I think it's called registered mail in the US. Registered or certified, I can't recall which one of the 2, but that one, the one that is for legal purposes. Out of the 6 big companies, only 4 have that. And all of the four are marked in the geo index of the Communist Party of China in the same way as letter stream. And they also have the geo features, like they have all the toys, right? So obviously, right, it seems to me that it's obvious that what this means is that the Chinese have an interest in obstructing justice, right, using the mail. And because they know that like if you're an attorney, like if you're a law firm, a big law firm, I imagine you would use one of these companies, right? Because you cannot be mailing things on the actual physical mailbox because this is too inefficient. I mean, if you're handling dozens or I don't know, tens of thousands of cases a year, imagine how many documents you have to mail. So of course, it makes sense for them to capture these companies because it's a way to read what everybody's mailing, even before it gets to the other party or before it gets to the courts, right? So this gives them a tremendous advantage by being able to inspect and read the certified mail or registered mail, whatever it's called, before it gets delivered in legal proceedings, right? So they gain automatically a few days of advantage, right, of time, and they can do many things with that time, right? They can go talk to the judge, they can go talk to the other party, they can obstruct, if they need to take an extreme action and eliminate a person, they can do it, right? Because they have a time buffer. But this is given by these companies that handle this special type of mailing that is for legal service. So this is dangerous, really. It looks not that dangerous, but I guess, right, what I'm trying to tell you is that what I discovered that they're doing to me, they're probably doing it at a huge scale, right? Like sending things to the wrong address and damaging intentionally the service, right? So people cannot be used in court, or they could be easily challenged and disqualified by their lawyers, right? So it's a dangerous thing for justice as a whole. So I hope someday somebody looks at this. The next item I did is about a move, a counter measure I took. So I described this in one of the demos. I think around March 5th, I think, around that time. Don't quote me on the day. I might be wrong about the actual date, but they caused an accident in which an agent of their network crashed into my car. Okay, and I was going to file something in the Supreme Court of the United States by mailing it via FedEx. And what they did is that they crashed into my car, so I could not mail it. Okay, they obstructed justice in that way. And I was going to mail it because I know exactly that I cannot mail it through letter stream because they will see it, right? They will read it before it gets to the court. And I wanted to remove as many advantages as I could from their side. So anyhow, they crashed into my car, right? But the counter move I did, so this, of course, the agent that created this accident, he filed a complaint with the insurance, right, to create a claim, like to harass me, right? And this is going to end up in courts, and I know what's coming. But at the end, this is also kind of a double-sided sword, because this is what I did, right? I took the transcripts of these demos, and in one of these demos, I talked about that accident and described it in detail, very detailed. Like it's basically like a legal declaration, if you think about it, right? Like an unsworn affidavit, something like that, right? So I took these parts of the book and I attached it to the insurance claim, right, as my declaration. And this is nuclear because the insurance companies are required by law to keep records for years. They cannot destroy them, right? So now my statements about what happened and the companies that are marked in the index of this database of the Chinese, all these things, Tyler Technologies is mentioned in those demos, Goldman Sachs, Vanguard, like all these things are now part of that insurance record, right? And when they try to litigate this, I'm going to go nuclear and bring this case to the highest level I can, right? Because this will allow me to get all this information into the legal record, right? So, they made a mistake by crashing into the car. I think it's obvious, right? Because it just gives me an opening, a door, to get all this information into a legal record that cannot be deleted, because this is protected by insurance regulations, Um, because there's a lot of litigation surrounding insurance claims. So they have to be compliant for the insurance company to be compliant. They're obligated to keep these records for many years. They can't redact them. They can't destroy them. They can't seal them. And I can, ask for discovery of those records anytime. So this is a tremendous weapon they gave. They was going to tell you, right. So now that I'm talking about insurance, let me tell you this. This could be important. I don't know if any agency comes across this sea of declarations, this could be important, right? So at the beginning, not the beginning, but after I realized that they had this network here in Katy. At this point, I hadn't captured the geo index, but I thought that this was localized here in Katy only, right? I didn't know that this was something that was worldwide because I did not have the database, right? But when I realized this, and that they had all these spy vehicles, and they were like switching them among agents, right? And I have videos even recorded of these events where they switched the cars among them. I'm talking about 2,000 cars in one. So in one event, in a morning, they could switch or shuffle across 2,000 agents, 2,000 cars. And in one of those occasions, I recorded them in video doing this, right? But anyhow, it occurred to me when that happened that this is insurance fraud, because those cars are insured and tied to the specific agent of this network that is going to drive that car. But they're taking the car and they're giving it to another agent, and obviously they're not going to be authorizing en masse all the other agents to drive the other cars, because this would leave a record. It would defeat the purpose, right? So I figured that it was insurance fraud, and I reported them to the insurance regulators. There's different departments that regulate insurance companies in different areas of the country. This is not a federal agency. Like there's an insurance regulator in Texas, and there's one in Florida. So I reported them to the insurance regulators where I thought they had their networks. Basically, I thought at the time it was only Texas, Florida, and California because of the tech bros, right? And Florida because of Wilmer Rupert, right? It's obvious to me that they have to have a lot of agents there. And the interest of Diosdado Cabello in Florida, which have been documented in media for years now, right? So by logic, I thought at least they must have this operation of switching the cars in Texas, California, and Florida. So I reported them for insurance fraud with the 3 regulators of these 3 different states. Of course, I've never heard back anything, not even a letter, right? I imagine because they blocked my report in the way they block all my reports, right? But I'm telling you this because it's, it's possible that one of those records survive somewhere, right? Maybe it's buried somewhere in a drawer, right? But it could be a way to get them, right? Because that's fraud. It's insurance fraud what they're doing really with the cars. Yes. Okay, the 2 sides. The 2 sides is about something, by the way, just so you know, the intercepting vehicles today are white. So the L2s are white. And this is a good segue to tell you something I got from the informant. It's the following. I mean, he didn't tell me this, but he told me a series of things that let me see that this is the case, right? I mean, it's a theory. I don't know if this is, I cannot prove it, of course, right? But it seems to me like this is what's happening. So it seems like these vehicles that they use, they have 2 sides to them. There's 2 sides to each vehicle, okay, the front and the back. And the idea is the front of the vehicle is used for visual surveillance and infrared surveillance, and not necessarily visible surveillance, but like things that have to do with sensors for surveillance, like the cameras, the infrared sensors, and the LiDAR or sonar that they have in that machine, right? So that's what the front of the vehicle is used for. And the back of the vehicle is used for data exfiltration and audio exfiltration, right? So if so what I'm trying to say is that the vehicle that downloads the audio is the one that is in front of me, while the vehicle that it's on my sides, right, like it's lateral, like 90 degrees, right, like on a cross street, for example, or behind my car, that is a surveillance vehicle, visual surveillance, right? So basically, the name of the game for them is to get me into a situation in which I approach the vehicle that is going to exfiltrate the data or the audio, uh, because that vehicle is going to be in front of me, right? So, and if you think about it, right? Well, first of all, this makes a lot of sense because it gives plausible deniability, right? Uh, so basically, the one that is following you is behind you or on the side, lateral, right? And the one that is stealing the data is in front of you, right? So if you go complain to the FBI, for example, the FBI is going to pay attention to the ones that are following you, behind you, right? And these are not getting any data from you, right? So even if they seize that vehicle, they will not see any data. I mean, the FBI, they won't be able to recover any data because that vehicle is not exfiltrating data. The one that is exfiltrating data is the one that is ahead of you. And that is the one that has plausible deniability because they're gonna say, how can I be following him if I'm ahead of him, right? But after this conversation with the informant took place and led me to realize this thing, I started thinking, well, but where could that interception device be? I mean, the device that exfiltrates the data from the vehicle that is ahead of you. Where could that be? Because the back of the vehicles are very distinct among them. They're not very standardized. You can have pickup trucks, you could have SUVs, you could have vans. Um, some have windows, some don't even have windows. So I started thinking, where would I put this device? If I was them. So I thought of the exhaust pipe, but it doesn't seem, because it's made of metal, it gets hot. It doesn't seem like a good place to put it. So I don't know. Let me tell you what I think. I think it is in the back windshield, like those antennas. Like at some point, I think over the late 90s, right? This trend came out that because before the cars and the vehicles used to have these antennas for the radio, right? For the FM radio. That was kind of a piece of metal, like a piece of aluminum. I don't know, like a small, I don't know how to call that. Like a radio antenna. That it's a string of metal that is standing up, right? But in the late 90s, this changed and became a series of lines in the rear glass, in the rear windshield. I don't know what to call that. The rear window of the car, right? They have like a series of lines made of copper, and that is the antenna now, right? So I mean, it makes sense. This is probably these copper wires on the window are probably the antenna that also exfiltrates the data because that catches radio frequency, right? So that would solve like 80% of the market, right? Because 80% of the vehicles have a rear window, right? You still have to solve the problem on the vans that don't have a rear window and the trucks and things like that don't have it. But on those, they usually, and in this area at least, when I look at them, they usually have a plastic antenna mounted on the back. So it seems to me like it's consistent, like and it's supposed to be the FM antenna, right? The radio antenna. But it seems consistent that all these vehicles, at least here in Katy, have the antenna on the back. In 2026, right? In year 2026. So it sounds like consistent, right, with what I'm hearing from the informant, right? So I guess if authorities ever see this, right, and you want to catch somebody with actual data in their car, you have to seize the vehicle that is in front of the target, not the one that is on the back. The one on the back is for tracking. And this is the reason why, because like they do this thing when I'm driving on the highway, they get a car on the back of my car very close, like tailing me aggressively. Like, I don't know if this is visible from that side, but as I'm driving, it feels like this person is going to crash into my car at any moment. This is harassment, really, right? And I thought that this was because they wanted to get close so they could intercept, right? Or exfiltrate the data, right? But now I understand that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is harassing me, so I speed up, and I get in a situation where I approach the vehicle that is ahead of me. It's a way to pressure me into speeding, increasing my speed, so I approach the vehicle that is in front of me, which is really the interceptor, right? So it's a way to apply pressure. It's harassment, but it's not because the car on the back is exfiltrating the data. It's because the car on the back wants me to increase my speed, so I eventually catch up to the one that is actually going to exfiltrate the data. So that's the TTP. Uh, yes. Uh, okay, so the next one is I'm gonna tell you a little bit. I'm not gonna get too much into it because it's boring to me. I mean, at this point, right? And I'll tell you something a little bit later. I'm gonna tell you about this thing yesterday, right at the court. So I went to the court. They gave me this citation, right? So it was supposedly a pre-trial. I go there. There's no judge. Okay. Remember, there's a motion to recuse that is pending. So this court really has no authority to do anything because there is a motion to recuse. I mean, that person should have not talked to me, but she offered to me to give me the discovery of the case. Of course, I know that I cannot say yes. I want the discovery, of course, but I can't engage with her because if I engage with her, I'm basically waiving my right for the automatic stay. I mean, when there is a motion for discovery pending, um, you have an automatic stay, and this is a right of the party that is asking for the recusal, right? But if I start reviewing documents with her and engaging with this was the prosecutor, right? The district attorney, I think it's called, a prosecutor. I don't know. So she offered to give me the discovery, right? And she had the documents that she wanted to show me, right? Which is odd because what I'm asking, I mean, I'm asking for some documents, but I'm asking for video as well. I didn't see any video recordings or any tapes or anything. She only had paper, right? But anyhow, she wanted me to go over the papers with her, right? And she offered to show me the discovery. But also two other important things happened, right, before this. One was that before the pre-trial sessions started, the bailiff, the same man that did not allow me to enter the courtroom on February 2nd, the same man, he stood up and made a declaration in like using all his voice, full force. He said, that all cell phones must be off, and that if he saw a person with a cell phone being on, he would ban the person from the courthouse. That's what he said. And he said, you cannot put it in silence. No, nothing of that is allowed. It has to be completely turned off. If I catch your screen glaring a little bit, you will be banned from the courthouse. So, of course, I comply because he is the authority, right? And I am a law-abiding citizen. So I turned off my cell phone. After this happened, is that the prosecutor calls me, right, a few minutes after, and she makes this offer, of course. She puts a caveat on the offer. She says that because I'm not an attorney, I'm not allowed to take the discovery evidence with me. That I can only review it in the courthouse, in the courtroom, with her, right? So I imagine, right? Like, and I don't know. I have to ask Gemini this question. I think this is not true. I mean, it cannot possibly be true because this means that a person without an attorney doesn't have access to justice. So it means that only people that have attorneys can have a fair chance in court. Because if you don't have an attorney, you don't have a right to discover it, really. Well, you could say, well, but she offered to show you the documents. But I mean, but look at what is really happening, right? They're offering to show me the documents, but the bailiff already told me that my phone has to be off. So even if she shows me the document, I cannot take photos of the document because I cannot turn on my phone. The bailiff already told me that. He will ban me from the courthouse if I turn on my cell phone. So I cannot take a photo. So even if I see the evidence and the evidence is damning to them, I don't have any proof that that evidence exists. I cannot take a photo. She's telling me that I cannot take it with me. So what am I gonna do with that knowledge? I guess the only thing I would do is to suffer, to think, how unfair this situation is and how abusive these people are. But I'm not going to be able to do any legal action with that. I don't have even a photo of the evidence. So what am I going to do? So this is a sham discovery. This is not a real discovery. So that's why I'm telling you that if this is true, I mean, I don't know, right? Because I'm not an attorney. Maybe what she's saying is true. I don't know. I have to check. But if what she's saying is true, what it means is that people in these courts in Fort Bend County, at least, that do not have an attorney, so people that are acting pro se, and in this country you have the right to represent yourself. That is a right. But if you are representing yourself, then you cannot basically have the right of discovery to discovery. You cannot ask the state for any evidence because you cannot take it with you. You cannot photograph it in court. So what are you going to do with the evidence? You know, I mean, I would need the evidence to be able to. I need to take it home so I can analyze it, right? I mean, this could be hundreds of pages of documents. They cannot expect me to analyze and memorize hundreds of pages of documents and understand them and analyze them in 5 minutes in this court, right? Sitting there. I need to take these to my home so I can work with them. I can ingest them into my servers. I can do things with them, right? But they won't do that. So I don't know, but this is the thing that they do, right? This is a TTP, right? They interpret the law in a bizarro way, right? Like this is the same thing that Troy Pickett did on, I think it was January 22nd, when he interpreted the third recusal rule differently. And he interpreted it to mean that he had the right to put me in jail, right? But it's a bizarre interpretation of the law. And because they control the judges and they control the clerks and they can do it, right? So it's another way of violating due process. But I imagine, right, the DOJ will look through that easily. So anyhow, they gave me another court date, and they pretended that. So she asked me if I wanted to see the evidence. Of course, I said no for these two reasons. First of all, there's nothing to win for three reasons, really. One is that there's nothing for me to win by looking at that evidence if I cannot take it home and I cannot photograph it. Secondly, engaging with her would mean giving them an opening to say that I am waiving my right to the automatic stay. And then they go ahead and violate my rights even further. And the third reason is what I was telling you about Vanguard, right? I understood, as a software engineer, I understand that if you want to do anything on a distributed system like this judiciary map reduce that they have to do it at the root, not at the leaf. Like if you want to do an improvement, a performance improvement, like that Artemis project that I worked at Google, I did it in the super root, right? Because that's where that's where you have more power. The higher you go in the aggregation ladder, the more power you have to affect things. I cannot be fixing that problem at Google at the leaves. I fixed it at the super root. And it's the same here. I'm not going to fix this fighting with this district attorney or with this prosecutor, right? I think she's a prosecutor. She's not a district attorney. I don't know. But this is not the solution. The solution is Vanguard. That's the solution. Vanguard and BlackRock and Goldman Sachs. That's where I'm going to get the answer, right? It's not fighting about this traffic ticket, obviously, right? So that's the third reason that I understand that I have to act is on the super roots, not on the nodes. To give you a colloquial term to this, in Spanish, we have a saying that, you want to talk with the owner of the circus, not with the clowns, right? It's more or less like that. Yes, and the last thing I have, well, actually I have two more things. One is that I talking about the power consumption. I told you in the last demo, right, that I use the battery banks to I use the battery banks to be able to use the computer so it's not connected to the power grid so they cannot monitor when I'm on the computer, right? So I'm doing this. By the way, I applied for a patent for this invention. So it's basically a more secure computer that cannot be used if it's connected to the power grid. Uh, so I mean that's funny, but that's not what I want to tell you. These power banks that I have, they have a power meter. They tell you how much power is being drawn in watts per hour from the battery. Uh, so as I'm doing this, right, that I have the computer connected to the power bank, and I have also the satellite connected, the satellite connection connected to the power bank. I realize that there is also a security flaw in these satellite antennas. This model that I have, the consumption of the modem is not constant. So if you are receiving data, it consumes, I don't know, I don't recall the number. Say that it's 30 watts, okay? But when you are making a request, so when you type in your browser google.com and it makes a request, so basically when the antenna is sending, beaming data up, the consumption of the modem and the antenna increases by 10 or 11 watts. And I think this is how they are detecting that I'm about to get data back, right? So, I mean, when it was connected to the power grid, so what I'm trying to tell you, I think they have resolution to monitor the consumption with a resolution of at least 10 watts. Because they can tell when the antenna is sending, they can discern when the antenna is sending versus receiving by this delta of 10 watts. And of course, when they see it's sending, because the internet is synchronous, I mean, the HTTP protocol is synchronous, they know that within the next 30 seconds, I'm going to receive. So they have to bring the car within the next 30 seconds, right? So, I mean, this is, I think, the finest point in their surveillance network to at least on the in regards to intercepting satellite connections, right? When they see that the power consumption increases by exactly 11 watts, they know they have to bring the car within 30 seconds. And they will be lucky, and if they pass the car within 30 seconds by the hot corner of Gary Gray and Joel Gray, they're golden. They got it, right? So that's how they time it in the last few hundred feet, right? Um, and the last thing I want to tell you, something I saw when I was right now I was doing some work near the airport, right? And I was parked in front of the rental car place at around 8:15 a.m. U.S. Central Time on March 24, 2026. And something interesting happened, right? So I'm there and I parked there for like 20 minutes, and they start, of course, get desperate, right? Because they don't know exactly what is that I'm doing, if I'm communicating, sending messages, right? So they start bringing a lot of cars. In one of these instances, I have my cell phone, one important cell phone one important cell phone that I use mounted in this adapter that I have on the windshield. Okay, and there is a car that comes driving by. The cell phone, I always have it in airplane mode, and it's not running Android. It's running a different operative system that I'm not gonna say here what it is, but I imagine they know what it is, right? But I'm not gonna risk it, so I'm not gonna give them any help. So I'm not gonna say what it is, but it's not Android, it's not Windows, it's not iOS, it's something else. Um, and this is important. And this thing that I'm telling you is important. So the phone is mounted on the windshield, is running a different operative system, and it's on airplane mode. And during this period of time, where I see that they're getting desperate, they bring a car that is being driven by a man, and the man makes a short stop next to my car, maybe a few seconds, and he has his windows rolled down, all the windows. Uh, and after he did that, he left, and my cell phone, the airplane mode was turned off automatically. I didn't touch the phone, but I saw when it got turned off. And this is profound what I'm telling you. What this means is that they have control over the hardware of this phone to a level that they can disable the airplane mode even if it's not running Android. Because, before I thought, well, because they control Google like a puppet, maybe they built a backdoor for Android phones. But this is not an Android phone. Now, interestingly, this is a Pixel phone, right? I mean, the hardware is a Google Pixel 9, I think it is. or 9A, I can't recall. But this means that they have a backdoor on the hardware to, by hardware, disable the airplane mode of the phone. So I don't know. It's concerning, right? But I'm offering you this more as a tip because I cannot prove it. This would require somebody with access to the hardware design of these Pixel phones to understand how that man did that. But it's important because it can be seen in the camera's recordings of the car when the man approached my car and he stopped for a couple of seconds next to the car. And you can see in the inner camera that I have in the car, in that channel, you can see that I say when I notice that they turn off the airplane mode, I said it I said it out loud. So you can see in that recording from those two different channels this sequence of events that I'm describing. I imagine it's not. I mean, it's not a proof, but it's something that would indicate to authorities that they have this capability. I imagine what they wanted was to turn on the cell phone capabilities of the phone, so it would connect to the internet and they could query the phone via the internet to see what is that I'm doing with the phone, right? To interrogate the phone from the internet. I think that's what they wanted. Uh, but I turned it back on. But I mean, I put it back on airplane mode immediately when I noticed. Anyhow, these are the things that I had for this demo D130. And I thank you again for your time, and I'll see you on the next one.